Any question if you guys have?
How Davis countered the criticism of crustal stability?
He was not there to counter that. He gave a theory in late. Yes, the crustal movement is the development of crustal geography or geomorphology, which includes seafloor spreading and plate tectonics, was a later development. So he was not there first to counter. That's basically a criticism of Davis theory, that he didn't really take into account all these factors. First, he was not visionary enough, but at the same time he has talked about accident, cyclic accidents in the accident parlance. It all can be covered up when he talks about that climate, when he talks about climate change and other features which might interrupt the cycle, जिसको उसने accident कहा है. It may be because rejuvenation he didn't consider as such, because he has talked about the cyclic evolution. अभी वही हम करेंगे, the critical analysis. The critical analysis of, there is a difference in critical analysis and criticism, right? If you talk about critical analysis, it is a comparison of both good and bad in the cycle. When we talk about criticism, it is mostly the negative points. Hope we understand, right? So critical analysis, first you talk about in the intro part as the importance of cyclic or orderly evolution of landform in understanding geomorphology. Simplified, easy to understand, even for a layman. Easy to retrodiction and prediction, in these lines you can talk about the critical analysis. You can begin with that, any of these lines. Then theory in brief. Assumptions make it a deductive approach. Which can't stand on the scientific scrutiny. Deductive, there are two types of approaches, deductive approaches and inductive approaches, right? Deductive approach is basically an approach which talks about general to particular. Like you generalize a version, you assume that this will happen. Just like you can say armchair study. बैठे हुए हैं, assumptions generate किया with a little bit of study, and then we have propounded a theory. Inductive approach is exactly opposite. Particular to general. You generalize a statement after lots of field studies, after lots of proof, after lots of analysis on the ground conditions. Then you make particular study, then you generalized it. You have a very general study and then you particularize it. That's the difference. DGP, To remember that, deductive is general to particular, and IPG, that is inductive particular to general. So this is basically based on scientific evidences. This is basically based on lots of empirical data. It's basically based on various types of studies and different conditions. And then you come to conclude, yes, if these things persist, there will be a general following, a general conclusion. For example, if we take into account, like I take one student, right, and I have seen him growing through, and then I know the condition that he works 8 hours, then he has this thing, just one, then he will qualify. So I will make a theory that all the students who work in this will qualify. So that may be a deductive approach, because I have very general statement, one, whether most of other factors has not been taken into account, what was his background, how since how long he started his studies, what is his level of IQ, what is his level of EQ, what is his level of backup, financial backup and all. I didn't take into much account. Even if that, if everything is taken into account, it can't be generalized, right? It can't be the basis for a particular statement, an absolute statement. So for particular to general, then I have to take into account various students, many students, and I have to study all the students, their circumstances, their background, their academic qualification, their emotional EQ, IQ, every Q is possible. And then if there is a matching of all the selected students, then I can pass a statement that is particular to, I have particularized. Okay, all these students have these things in common. So if this is common thing, common traits are found in any students, he or she will qualify. This is inductive approach, where you have lot of field studies, lot of comparative analysis, lot of data available for you. So in those studies, those discussions which you don't have data, that's the inability of the cyclic evolution of landforms. Basically because if you look at this aspect, the landform evolution is a multi-million years phenomena. Like at least 10 million years is minimum required for any area to understand its actual evolutionary processes. Minimum. Like Himalaya is a very good example of that. It started forming in 100 million years and it is still rising. Last 2 million years though have been very active period. Yet 2 million years is a big duration just for an area to get uplifted. Forget about it's brought to a featureless plain or a low-lying area. So that ways, deductive approach, automatic deductive approach doesn't have enough capacity to stand on any scientific scrutiny. Now then talk about, yeah. Sorry?
Generalization applied to a particular person or a particular place will be an inductive approach.
Particular to general, a study which is particular, which is specific, and now you generalize it.
Application of any theory is like an inductive approach.
Application of?
Certain like particular evidences and all.
No, application of that theory just directly is again deductive approach. If you apply it, then application, suppose for example Weber has given you a theory. So if you apply that theory in general, that's just like the way they have suggested, without actually going into particulars of it, without actually studying the industries which have been established on the basis of Weberian principle in the past, that is a deductive approach. You blindly sitting here, you read Weberian concept and you started doing. No, you should go and test all the industries which has been set up on the basis of Weberian concept, and then you try to make a study. Okay, these are the studies, field studies suggest that Weberian concept is applicable for these type of industries, has failed in this, partially successful, and now you come to a conclusion that if I apply all this, this becomes inductive. But you read the theory and you tell all the students कि okay, जाओ अपना industry establish करो, raw material पे ये कर दो, that is deductive. Got it? Now, यहाँ पे will bring the comparative analysis of Davis and Pink. That will give you a fair amount of idea about Penck as well, and critical analysis of Davis, right? So we will talk about where you have to miss out some of the things when you only, if the question is only about critically analyze the Davisian concept of cycle of erosion, right? So you don't need to mention Penck in detail, but if you present a comparative analysis of Davis and Penck, so that will be the answer. A part of it will be deducted to answer the previous question. Like first, the related to upliftment. If it is about critical analysis of Davis, directly talk about it. If it is present a comparative analysis of Davis and Penck, then you can start with similarities between them first. Similarities between Davis and Penck. Present a comparative analysis of the Davisian cyclic evolution of landforms suggested by Davis and Penck. Critically analyze the Davisian cycle of erosion. Then Penck cycle of erosion is an improvement over Davisian cycle of erosion. The content will be similar, the presentation style will be different. Getting my point? तो पहले हम लोग समझ लेते हैं comparative analysis of Davis and Penck, then we'll talk about these things separately. First is similarity, that orderly evolution of landform is a norm rather than exception. Both believed that. Both believed in orderly evolution of landforms or cyclic evolution of landforms. Both accepted that upliftment is essential for the erosion to begin. Third, both believed that the end product of the cycle will be a featureless plane. Both believed that the end has to be completed by exogenic forces only. Both of them have largely ignored the role of climate and crustal geography, crustal geomorphology to play its role in the evolution of the landform. None of them have incorporated humans' role into the cycle. Hope we understand each part here. Orderly evolution, we understand that there will be orderly evolution of landforms in any area. That means cyclic evolution associated with the continuation of landform from youthful to mature to old stage, though they differ in their approach. Both accepted that upliftment is essential for the erosion to begin. Both believed that the end product of the cycle will be a featureless plane. Some has called it penny plane and other has called it Endrumpf. Both believed that the end has to be completed by exogenetic forces only, because upliftment has to stop after a point of time, though they differ in their approach. That's a different issue, but both suggested that upliftment will stop after a point of time and then erosion will complete the whole cycle. Then this aspect, crustal geography, climate geomorphology, is a later development, where the climate also plays a very, very significant role in the evolution of landform. For example, if you might be asked a separate question on crustal geomorphology and climate geomorphology, because they have started asking about, they discuss the North American School of Geographers and their role in geomorphology. So here, climate geomorphology means role of climate in the evolution of geomorphology, that is scientific study of the landforms. How will affect in the cyclic evolution? Look at the role of climate. Climate affects vegetation. Vegetation has a lot of role in the rate of erosion, in the rate of movement of water, the flow of water, or for that matter any erosional agents. Then various types of climate produces different types of processes. Like for example, in an arid and semi-arid region, wind will be an important erosional agent. In a humid region, a river will be an important erosional agent. Then crustal aspect, how the landforms produced because of tectonic movement may result into different types of process, may accelerate the process. Getting that point? In some climatic conditions, even the structure may play different role in different climatic conditions. For example, the rate of weathering is largely dependent upon the temperature range. If the temperature range in any area is very high, the weathering rate will be higher, and so on, right? So role of climate in geomorphology was largely ignored by them. Then climate change itself will be responsible for producing rejuvenation, like sea level change. In a global warming period, the rate of erosion will vary depending upon the area. When the sea level is changed during glacial period, then chances of rejuvenation will be there. Nick point formation will be automatically there, right? Like Nick point formation हम लोग बात किए, I hope you guys remember that. Nick point is associated with the subsidence of land. What is rejuvenation? Increase in erosive power of a river. Now, increase in erosive power may be affected by the presence or absence of vegetation, which has been ignored. So that is climate geography and crustal geography, crustal geomorphology together, which is definitely a later development, and for that they cannot be blamed for. But when we study in the present circumstances and the practical reality of the present days, as a student of geographers, we are bound to take into account other factors, especially the climatic part and the crustal part. Hope we are clear? Do you need to write that? ब्रीफ कर लो अपना हल्का सा जब हम क्लाइमेट जियोमॉर्फोलॉजी की बात करते हैं. Let's first finish it. None of them have incorporated humans' role into the cycle. Define, जब हम लोग बाद में पढ़ेंगे जो geographical thought है, तो उसमें एक छोटा सा ब्रीफ बताते हैं कि the earliest geographer till almost 17th century were very heavily influenced by the philosophy of determinism, environmental determinism. What do we mean by that? कि ह्यूमन बिहेवियर और मैन एनवायरमेंट रिलेशनशिप की जब हम बात करते हैं तो ह्यूमन बिहेवियर इज डिटरमाइंड बाय the environmental conditions. Human interaction with the environment is determined by environment. बहुत सारे जोग्राफर ने, जैसे इसी सैंपल का नाम है, रेडजल का नाम है, वो हम लोग बाद में पढ़ेंगे. सिर्फ छोटी सी फिलॉसफी, इसका ब्रीफ आइडिया जानना विल बी वेरी हैंडी इन दीज एरियाज. तो उसमें क्या कहते हैं वो कि एनवायरमेंटल, यहाँ तक कह चुके हैं. एक अमेरिकन जोग्राफर थी इसी सैंपल. शी सजेस्टेड दैट, शी पास्ड ए स्टेटमेंट दैट मैन इज अ प्रोडक्ट ऑफ द अर्थ. That means environment controls so much. That's what you call determinism. Environment determines human behavior or human relationship with environment. Then came the philosophy of possibilism, जो 17th century में शुरू होता है और उसके बाद दोनों में काफ़ी लंबी तकरार चलती है. There's a lot of discourse between these two schools, determinism and possibilism. But finally, possibilism was accepted as a more appropriate school of philosophy when they suggested that environment provides only possibilities where human is free to choose from. That means environment creates an outer periphery. Within that periphery there is ample scope for human to choose from. इसको समझने के लिए we can take several examples. For the possibilist, every action of human is determined by environment. For the determinist, for the possibilist, you cannot grow wheat in tundra region. That is the outer boundary. But within, away from tundra region, you have enough amount of variation in the climate and you can choose as per your will. Right? Later on in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, there was development that's called quantitative revolution, system analysis, which started theoretizing the man-environment relationship, where quantitative techniques were applied, mathematical tools were applied to take care of man-environment relationship, where they can be quantified. So that's called quantitative revolution. System analysis is one example of that. But there was heavy criticism of that geography deals with humans, and humans' behavior can't be quantified, because it varies tremendously with different individuals in different regions. So then you have lot of humanistic geography, radical geography, behavioral geography, welfare geography. वो बाद में हम लोगों को उसमें पढ़ेंगे, जो कहता है कि man is in the center in man-environment relationship. They defy all the logics of determinists, they defy even the logics of possibilist, and they defy quantification of human behavior and man-environment relationship. So now if you look at this, the philosophy is that in the beginning man doesn't exist as far as man-environment relation is concerned. In the middle, in man-environment relationship, man is also an important agent. In later phase, man is far, far more important than the environment itself. The evolution is directly related with the technological efficiency humans have developed, right? Because in the ancient time, in the medieval time, you can't expect humans to really have controlling power over environment. But nowadays, Dubai is supposed to be, Dubai is a desert area, one of the densest island on the surface of the earth, which is supposedly not, right? Several other examples you can cite for that. How to handle cyclone, even the disaster, even the prediction of earthquake. But there is a counter effect also. When you go for a lot of industrialization, lot of technical efficiency, you see the wrath of environment in the form of global warming, in the form of several diseases, in the intensity and frequency of disasters, which is continuously increasing nowadays. तो एक मिक्स है, इट्स अ वेरी कॉम्प्लेक्स मैन एनवायरमेंट रिलेशन की जब बात जब करते हैं तो यहाँ पे हम करेंगे दिस इज द प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट इन द प्रेजेंट डे मैन एनवायरमेंट रिलेशनशिप which was bound to be ignored by the earlier theorists, by the earlier geographers. So when we criticize in the present day, we'll take into account the man-environment relationship, where man do play a very central role in man-environment relationship, including the landform evolution. Isn't it? For example, if you remove all the vegetation found in Himalaya, and gradually it can be done by human, unchecked deforestation, can always do that. So rate of erosion is multiplied in the upper reaches. So you have reduced the cyclic period. The evolution of landform might be different if vegetation is not allowed to develop naturally, right? Man has the capacity to dam the river. Man has the capacity to redirect the river flow. Man has the capacity to increase the underground seepage and aquifers. Right? So in all these cases, for example, wind checks and wind breaks, if you go for agricultural activity, Israel is a very good example where they have transformed the desert into a lush green area. So man-environment relationship has experienced a sea change. So for the practical reality and the present day man-environment relationship, man has to be a part of, at least in the center and the middle, as an integral part of the man-environment relationship. So here also the cycle of erosion cannot ignore the role of humans in cyclic evolution of landforms. Climate geomorphology. Is basically associated with role of climatic factors in the evolution of landform, or as an integral part of. So obviously it affects vegetation, which in turn affects the process, right? It affects rate of weathering, weathering rate will vary depending upon the different types of climate. Then it determines the types of process to be present in an area, right? Then we have climate change and its impact over base level, hope we understand this also. Eustatic, isostatic. Then we have crustal geomorphology. If you talk about crustal geomorphology, it is associated with crusts. So then we have seafloor spreading, development of plate tectonic theory. Then we have isostatic adjustment, and its role in the evolution of landform. Isostasy means in equipoise, equibalence. Brief में अभी बात करते हैं. This is theory, we'll discuss that later. Isostasy means if any part of crustal is pressed under, the other part will be uplifted. Just like a balance. In a case of balance, when you start putting a lot of pressure here, this will rise. So that's what you call compensation. So there are several theories regarding that level of compensation and all. So this is the moment there is offloading of the area. Let's say Himalaya is being offloaded. Western Ghat is a light example in like this. Himalaya is being offloaded with sediments. Sediments are removed from Himalayan region and deposited in the coastal area. So that coastal area will be pushed downward. And that in the bottom substratum, the material will keep on pushing it and Himalaya will rise. Right, so this is isostatic adjustment. So that may take place in the localized area. Some area may subside. That is also a part of crustal geomorphology. Subsidence is maybe a local phenomena as well because of endogenetic forces, or raised beaches are very good examples. There are several areas in the coastal region which has been uplifted locally, so that may affect the base level and deposition, rejuvenation, all right. So that has been largely ignored by that. But when we compare Davis and Pink, they are not known for their similarities, rather they are more known for their dissimilarities, right? So more famous for their dissimilarities. And the most important, it starts with dissimilarities associated with the upliftment. Davis suggests that upliftment is a short period and sudden phenomena, whereas Pink states that it is a long period and slow phenomena. Besides, Davis also suggests that the erosion starts, इसको छोड़ दो, second point को छोड़ दो. First we'll have a critical analysis in the first part, upliftment. Now critically analyze. Let's say suppose the question is asked, critically analyze the Daviesian cycle of cycle. So we'll take this part. Davis suggests that upliftment is a short period and sudden phenomena. So we'll critically analyze this statement rather than giving this one. Then while giving a reference of Pink, then we will tell that Pink suggested it's a long period and slow phenomena, right? So when critically analyze this one, Daviesian cycle of erosion, Daviesian statement. Now Daviesian suggests upliftment is short period and sudden phenomena. For the larger part on the Earth surface, the upliftment is tectonic in origin and they are definitely a long period and slow phenomena. So when we compare, suggest that Pink's statement is an improvement over Davis. When you critically analyze, then talk about this and then give a lot of examples. Let's say Himalaya or all the tertiary fold mountain for that matter, or other tertiary fold mountains have been produced for a long period, at times even more than 50 million years. So in this sense, purely Davis. in this sense, Davis contradicts his own source of theory of just a second. Theory of uniformitarianism. Do we remember that? Theory of uniformitarianism. Present is the key to the past. So when you are studying, taking this as a source, the dictum given by Hutton, James Hutton, that present is the key to the past. So when you are studying, the source is this, and Davis was basically influenced by Darwin's concept of evolution of species, right? So यहाँ पे वो क्या कहता है? Present is the key to the past. So when you talk about present, as far as upliftment is concerned, a much larger area has been covered by the features which are very slow and a long period phenomena. Getting that point or not? In the beginning we have talked about that theory of uniformity has been the basis for the evolution of cyclic landforms, right? And theory of uniformitarianism means there has been uniformity in the process. So the processes which are operating today must have been operating in the past. Present is the key to the past. Must have been operating in the past, may not necessarily be with the same rate. ठीक है? अब ये आप लेकर के आप बेसिस बनाते हैं, and then you are passing a statement which is contradictory to the present day uplifted area. Because if you take into account the uplifted area on the earth's surface, most of the mountains are tectonic in origin, and the tectonic origin, that fold mountains, are a very long period phenomena, right? So that ways it contradicts. ये statement generally आप देंगे, तो you'll have to write in detail. A bit of explanation is needed here. In continuation, as the fold mountains occupying the largest area are slow and long period phenomena, as is proven by the theory of plate tectonics. Yes, in that sense, Penck is closer to that source. And it's not about theory of uniformitarianism. It's about when I am passing a statement, that should be correct to the larger perspective if I want to theorize, if you want to propound a general statement. Right? So at least majority of the, let's suppose I am taking into account various traits a successful student should have. So at least that should comply, that should come closer to the majority of the students rather than minority of the students. So he has taken the theory of uniformity as a source of guidelines, right? Yet he contradicts that statement itself in the sense that he is not taking into account the present day uplifted area, which suggests otherwise, that is a long period and slow phenomena, right? However, a Penck critical, Davis ka critical analysis, if you want to add. However, his statement may be true for the volcanic landforms, which is a sudden phenomena. That is exclusive when you critically analyze Daviesian cycle. Now we are exclusively talking about Davis. So critically analyze some positive aspects also. Penck cycle is an improvement over Daviesian cycle. You don't need to write this. Hope we are getting it. Criticism, you don't need to write it. Right? Present a criticism of Davis and suggest how Penck is an improvement over Davis. Penck cycle is an improvement. Now when you compare Penck wala, then give examples. The presence of antecedent rivers in the Himalayan region is a very good example of it being a long period and slow phenomena. Indus Gorge near Nanga Parvat. I-shaped valley, V-shaped valley, etc. are examples of it being slow and long period phenomena. Hope we can explain it also. Right? If it is not slow, the antecedents will not develop. If Himalaya would have risen suddenly, then the river wouldn't have crossed it so easily. So since it is rising slowly, the river could maintain its own path and keep on cutting at a level where it was flowing earlier. Hope we got it, right? So that ways you can prove these, the presence of these.
This one can relate Penck and Davis.
No, this is Penck's. Penck says that it's not a sudden and short period phenomena, right? But Penck says, Davis says that it is a short and sudden period phenomena. So that ways when you are supposed to prove that Penck is an improvement over Davis, ये सब चीजें लिखनी पड़ेगी. Critically analyze Davis, then again you will have to talk about, but give in a brief. For example, the presence of this proves that it's a long period phenomena. You may mention and may not mention Penck. You don't need to go into details of Penck's statement. Then you are simply critically analyzing Daviesian cycle of erosion. Hope you are able to. अलग-अलग तो करने की जरूरत नहीं है ना, कर सकते हो ना तुम, इतने स्मार्ट तो हो ही तुम लोग, right? So besides Penck suggests that during the period of orogeny there is a lull in between, whereas Davis suggests that it is continuous. Presence of parallel ranges in all the fold mountains are evidence in support of Penck's statement. besides the presence of structural valley in between the parallel ranges also proves the same. For example, MCT, MBT in the Himalayas. Main central thrust, main boundary thrust.
So presence of parallel ranges उसका तरीका
In the fold mountain, वो कटा हुआ है. In all the fold mountains. In all the fold mountains are evidence in support of Penk's statement. Besides the presence of structural valleys in between the parallel ranges also proves the same. For example, MCT, MBT in the Himalayas.
MCT full
Main central thrust, main boundary thrust. Thrusting is a process of compression, fold mountain or Rajini. Right? We'll discuss that detail. एक एग्जाम्पल जब देना यहाँ पे तो दे दोगे. जब हम हिमालय की बात करेंगे तब आ जाएंगे. पैरेलल रेंजेस का एग्जाम हमेशा यहाँ पे ना इस तरह की जो भी चीजें आए ट्राई टू मेक अ डायग्राम. इस तरह की चीजें पैरेलल रेंजेस. वन, obviously this is structural valleys will be formed only when there is a lull period. It's a gap in the two compressive forces generated.
Time gap or
Time gap. Time gap. That time gap will produce this structural valleys, and that valleys are reflected through faults or thrusting. Right. So that parallel ranges first. The presence of parallel ranges is an example of, if let's say suppose there is a continuous phenomena, there is no lull period. So the mountain should have been like this rather than parallel ranges. Right. And that is further proved technically by the presence of the structural valleys between the two parallel ranges. So that proves the statement of Penck is much closer to the practical reality existing on the surface rather than the absolute statement of Davis. Again, Davisian statement here again Davisian statement may be true only in a narrow sense of the landforms or for the upliftment related to volcanism. So we are clear here? Sure.
Sir, is it so Frank's theory were given in German like this, so it was not widely known and understood?
Initially it was there, but it got translated in English. 1924 May he
Is it a
started.
factor to like less
Popularity.
popularity, right?
I'm like, for the lack of popularity, there can be several reasons. He was a German first. So Americans and the Britishers, British geographer, have very vehemently. Deepak, blue color का marker color होगा? Blue, red, green, दो तीन ले आओ. So basically, he being the German, and the political situation between the Germans and the rest was very bad. This was just after First World War. So that's the biggest reason, though books may not write. Second thing is that in German, the language German was not that popular as compared to English. So whatever Davis suggested, or maybe British geographer has suggested, they were more popular. So the criticism from Penck was not so popular unless until that was translated into English. When it was translated into English, it got also the less basic reasons what Penck wanted to suggest. So that's a different thing. We don't need to go into that because we are talking in the present day world. Then we have second aspect is related to erosion. You can club it also. Related to upliftment and erosion can be a single point as well, right? Or separately. Related to erosion, Davis suggested that erosion starts only after the completion of the upliftment. Whereas Penck suggests that both go hand in hand, though the upliftment is essential for the beginning of the erosion. According to Penck, erosion can't wait for the upliftment to complete. His study of Andes Mountain has strengthened his belief which was or which is still rising. Yeah, there is a variation in that. The rate of upliftment and rate of erosion, he saw there may be variation, but he suggests that erosion to begin with, it's not necessary that upliftment has to complete first and then erosion starts. What Davis suggests that for the erosion to start, upliftment must be completed. So erosion starts only after the completion of the upliftment. Upliftment is completed, then erosion starts. Penck, that's the Penck is an improvement over Davis. जब हम बात करेंगे तो इस लाइन पे we'll talk about it. Sorry? नहीं. That's not conical. Conical shape is associated with the volcanic mountains. The peaks may be there, and the upliftment will. That's how the plate tectonics we have discussed. In the theory of plate tectonics, the sediments presented in the middle of the two converging boundary will be compressed and folded. So there will be linear fold and slope. That slope may vary because the compressive forces may not be uniform throughout in the convergent boundary. That's a different issue. That's why passes are developed. That's why the height also differs. So the volcanic eruption which is coming and causing upliftment of the area may not have uniform force below the mountain. So that's a different issue, but they will not be conical. Conical is from all sides. We can give examples here also. Again, the gorges, canyons, the V-shaped valley, all are example of the erosion is and upliftment go hand in hand. Best example is that Himalayas is still rising. The Himalayan mountains is still rising and is evidenced from the occurrence of the earthquake in the region. The presence of earthquake, as per the theory of plate tectonic, is an important evidence of the fact that subduction is still going on, or there is something going on in the bottom of the plate. That's why earthquake will be produced. So obviously this is also an important evidence. Sorry? If the erosion starts only after the completion of the upliftment, then I-shaped valley will not be formed. Then gorges will not be formed. Then even antecedents will not be formed. So the first, all the examples. If it is not rising, then the I-shaped valley will not be formed. The valley will be much, much broader. An area which is static and the rivers is eroding, then may not be formed. Then you can give example of the entrenched meander. It's a very good example of erosion and upliftment go in hand. Entrenched meander, do you remember? Ingrown and symmetric and asymmetric meander. Then if you look at that incised meandering is a product of rejuvenation in the higher reaches of the rivers. You can give example of Grand Canyon of Colorado. So presence of erosional floodplain, presence of incised meander, presence of interlocking spurs, all are example of this fact that erosion and upliftment go hand in hand. ज़्यादा तो नहीं हो रहा है? Oh no, I'm not talking about. अच्छा, आँख में कुछ खराबी है? Okay, no, I'm talking about the concept, whether what I've talked about. Why don't you have progressive one? Progressive lens. If you go for progressive lens, that will not be there. That's why if you look at the statement, Davis landform is a function of a structure, process and stage. That's the statement. Bank landform is a product of combined interaction between the endogenic and exogenic forces. Division emphasis over structure is an important aspect which was not given its due importance by Pink. The role of structure is of paramount importance in the evolution of landforms. Though both of them differs in the role of endogenic and exogenic forces, especially their magnitude, timing and relative intensity, they don't differ much as far as these two statements are concerned. Timing, magnitude, timing and relative intensity of exogenic and endogenic forces, they do differ. But the absolute type of statement, even Davis talks about endogenic forces. The upliftment is essential for the erosion to commence, to begin, right? Penck also says the same thing, that upliftment is essential for the erosion to start. Though they differ in explanation. The relative magnitude, the upliftment will be completed, only then erosion will start. Davis, upliftment will be initially very strong, much higher than the erosion. Penck, then it will be balanced, then it will decrease, then after a point of time it will stop, only giving way to the erosion to complete the cycle.
The role of structure is of paramount importance in the evolution of landform. It is our statement or given by them?
No, our statement. When we are critically comparing, if we are comparing Davis and Penck, or if you are critically analyzing Davis, then when you are critically analyzing Davis, that statement, so obviously the role of these three factors, you can have a bit of criticism about the stages, that is timely evolution of the landform. But structure you cannot deny. Types of rocks, the nature of joints, the nature of rocks affecting not only the rate of erosion but also the processes, the intensity of erosion, intensity of weathering and mass wasting. The structure includes various other aspects also. So that ways it has to play a very important role in the evolution of landform, which is largely ignored by Penck. So here Davis has some edge over Penck, or at least he is not very conclusive or conspicuous in talking about structure the way Davis was very clear. So as far as, that's why if you see, as far as the statement is concerned, Davisian statement still has much greater validity, acceptance and popularity as compared to the statement of Penck. Penck's statement is a very, very generalized statement where it suggests that landform is a evolution, landform evolution is a function of both interaction of endogenetic and exogenetic forces. It is not denied by Davis also, right? Though the nature and the timing and the intensity may differ with these two different geographers. Then timely evolution of landforms. Here both has to be criticized. Davis used the term stages, whereas Penck has used the term phases. Davisian youthful, maturity, mature and old stage has been criticized by Penck, who suggested 5 phases of evolution of landforms. Though his phase is also only 3, that is Aufstiegende Entwicklung. That's the term. Then he suggests second phase as Gleichförmige Entwicklung. Then Absteigende Entwicklung. That's the German word for it. Waxing phase, uniform phase and waning phase.
Can we learn these 3 names?
Yes, can we? Do you know? You have much greater capacity, man.
No.
Should we?
Should we?
Yeah, क्या बुराई है? Aufstiegende.
We will by heart whole theory in spite of these 3 words.
Aufstiegende Entwicklung. Gleichförmige. Gleichförmige. And then Absteigende Entwicklung. Even for the Germans it is very tough. And the Germans have criticized that why does he need to use such a high sounding and complex term rather than using the simple one. That's why waxing is obviously increasing slope, uniform slope, uniformity, and waning slope, decreasing. Then this Gleichförmige has been further divided into 3 groups. That is the Penck's phase of cycle of erosion.
He also listed 5 phases
Hmm.
and again 3 phases.
So this 3 is further divided into 5. Within these three, he has talked about 5 phases. Broadly, he has 3, but each is divided. Especially the Greek formage is divided into 3 phases. So that's how you have 5 phases.
Both has talked about the role of time.
That's why they don't differ much, except in the fact that overall explanation of phases.
Sir, Davis ने endogenic evidence तो दिए थे क्या?
Sorry?
Endogenic evidence तो दिए थे?
Simplification के लिए. First, so that he was very perfectly aware of that. Like especially if you see that he was working in New England, USA. And it's a relatively flat area, tectonically inactive area, yet humid region. So obviously he was basically of the fact that this area will be laid down to rest or maybe a featureless plain after a point of time. So he didn't talk about that endogenetic forces to reduce the complexity of the cyclic evolution of this theory. It's not that he was not aware of the fact. And if you look at that, like when we critically analyze Davis, then you can talk about good number of initial landforms. There is a difference in the study. What Penck has done, he has worked in Germany and then he went to Andes. So Andes is tectonically active area. New England is tectonically inactive area. Now if you, let's say Chota Nagpur Plateau. The Chota Nagpur Plateau may not necessarily have the evidence of the plate tectonics, because when Chota Nagpur Plateau was being formed, at that time plate itself was not very developed. Getting my point? In the initial evolution of Earth, the deposition of magma would have been producing a small scattered island. That's what we call the continental accretion nucleus. So a small projected land, because initially the Earth was roughly in a molten state. So when it was cooling and solidifying, the cooling and solidification would have begun from the top, right? So initial cooling and solidification, magma would have come wherever they wanted, can easily come out, because the surface would very molten and very soft, just like the newborn baby head, right? So if the magma would have wanted, it would have come from anywhere. So you have a lot of volcanic eruptions. After a point of time when it started close to be very solid, then magma wouldn't have been easy for magma to come out on the surface. So what happened? The magma came wherever it has relatively easier area or a relatively softer area. So when magma came and deposited, that formed a small continental nucleus. Then erosion and deposition has started increasing. So several small islands then joined together, either by the gap between these islands were filled by sediments or they were pushed to come close to each other. That's how these 2 small islands might have become a slightly larger island. Then few islands again in the same process would have larger island. Then continent. That's how we call continental accretion nucleus. Like 3 well identified nucleus in our country is Chota Nagpur Plateau, Karnataka Plateau and Bundelkhand Plateau. In between, the minor one is Bastar Plateau, and all these 4 are rich in mineral resources. So if you look at the people or the geographers or the surveyor who are studying and discussing about those areas, they might not take into account the tectonic processes and the role of endogenetic forces, because volcanism is relatively a short period phenomena. When we talk into account, especially with respect to Earth history, the period taken for volcanism is not very long. So it is a short period phenomena, number one. Whenever the volcanic eruptions takes place, especially in the form of central eruption, where mountains are formed, so what will happen? The erosion will start generally after the completion of the upliftment. So that's the difference. So Davis basically has emphasized in accordance with the area he was working upon, and more importantly to simplify his theory. Because had it been the erosion and upliftment goes on continuously, the things would have been much more complex. So just for the sake of making it much more simplified, he almost ignored the endogenetic processes and its intensity.
So when were these theories presented? Davis and Penck.
1889 Davis, 1924 Penck. I'll have 5 minutes break.
Metamorphic features essentially found in the topographies under the second cycle of erosion.
Rejuvenation. Second cycle of erosion. First cycle of erosion, then is normal cycle of erosion. Then second cycle of erosion is the rejuvenation. या polycyclic landforms को बोलते हैं, multicyclic landforms. अभी हम बात करेंगे उस पर. हाँ हाँ, तो बहुत सारे ही लिखेंगे ना. एक लाइन में पढ़ा है. रिजुविनेशन है पूरा रिजुविनेटेड लैंडफॉर्म हमने पढ़ा है. एक पॉइंट देना पड़ेगा, फिर बेस लेवल चेंज देना पड़ेगा, फिर लैंडफॉर्म्स की बात करनी पड़ेगी. सॉरी, हेडवर्ड इरोजन की बात करनी पड़ेगी, बेस लेवल चेंज, देन रिग्रेडेड प्रोफाइल. ऑल दीज विल हैव टू टॉक अबाउट. Yeah.
Normal cycle and arid cycle of Davis.
Arid cycle Davis does not talk about directly, but he talks about that this cycle can be modified. That's the next criticism we'll have. Both of them have talked about the river as the main process, though more universal erosional agent is river, but none of them have exclusively talked about the other erosion or multiplicity of the processes. वो अभी हम बात करें. अभी कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ साइकिल ऑफ इरोजन. डोंट वरी.
Both have talked about, does both Penck and Davis talk about sequential evolution?
Like landform.
Agreed on this.
Both have agreed on this, that youthful, mature, old, there will be end product, peneplain. So that has to be criticized also. The statement we are talking about, right? So first the Penck Davis cycle हम बता चुके हैं. Time, youthful, mature and old. What Penck has suggested, let's write about it. In the first phase, that is of Stiegende, in the first phase, Penck suggests that the rate of upliftment is higher than the rate of erosion. Consequently, both the absolute altitude, that is absolute height, and the relief, that is the difference between the maximum and minimum height, increases. Vertical erosion is dominant, but lateral erosion is absent. Critical analysis. Youthful stage, what Davis has suggested, and what Penck has suggested. So Penck talks about the relative relief and absolute height, which is very much similar to that of Davis. However, he talks about both hand in hand. The only difference, he talks about, so youthful characteristics suggested by Penck is closer to the reality, practical reality, than that of Davis. And the the second phase, he suggests that the rate of upliftment is still higher than the rate of erosion. But the summits starts experiencing exogenic forces, exogenic effect leading to uniformity in absolute height as well as relief. Rate of down cutting or vertical erosion is almost equal to rate of lateral erosion. In the third phase, the rate of upliftment and erosion are equal. Hence, the relief and absolute height relative height are uniform. In the fourth phase, upliftment stops, but erosion continues. Hence, there is a decrease in absolute height and relief, but relief remains largely stationary in the beginning of this phase, but decreases in the later part. In the fifth phase, vertical down cutting ceases to exist and the continuous lateral erosion reduces the area into a flat, featureless topography with occasional occurrence of projected landform of harder rocks which he called Endrumpf. That featureless plain he called Endrumpf. 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 As Davis has called it, penny plain. Monadnock is the projected landform. Projected landform is Monadnock. That Davis has also called it Monadnock. And he has called penny plain. Davis has called it penny plain. The featureless topography is penny plain, and Penck calls it Endrumpf. This projected landform is Monadnock. And the overall landform or the overall area is called Endrumpf. The end of the featureless plane, both of them have called a featureless plane. The name is different. Davis calls it penny plane, Penck called it Endrumpf, Elseking has called it penny plane. He talks about the arid cycle of erosion.
So in the first phase, the vertical erosion is much higher than the upliftment.
Vertical erosion is lower than, upliftment is higher than erosion.
So the पेड़ पर भी दो बन जाएगा.
Sorry?
एक पेड़ आएगा ना पर दो बनना चाहिए. फिर पेमेंट ज़्यादा है vertical erosion. So एक बोलने में नहीं.
I didn't get you.
सर अगर upliftment ज़्यादा है vertical erosion से, तो एक बोल बन जाएगी ना फिर रिवर के रास्ते पे.
नहीं, vertical erosion is, vertical upliftment is more and erosion is less than that. So it will not create a wall, rather river will keep on carving out its path. So rate of erosion is less than the vertical upliftment.
That wall will be there, na?
Yes, that will be there. That's how the I-shaped valley will be created. That's how the gorges will be created. That's why it's closer to the practical reality. When we see the youthful stage of a river in the mountainous region, the formation of I-shaped and V-shaped valley can be explained in an easier manner in the way Penck has suggested rather than Davisian suggestion. नहीं, erosion नहीं होता है initial period में या overall? हाँ, obviously. Whenever the vertical down cutting is there, so river though has started working here, will keep on making the relative stability of area weaker. Now look at here, if the initial I-shaped valley, so there will be a lot of rain wash and this area has been made vulnerable. Though river is not running here, yet because of river, this area will be made more vulnerable. That's how the convex shape will be initiated. When we discuss slope evolution, then we'll talk about that. The variation in their approach is about slope evolution. Right. So the upper part, summit will keep on coming. That's what upper height. So upper height we have already talked about in the river morphology. Channel morphology we have talked about how the upper part area will be downwashed through rain wash, weathering and mass wasting. The river may not be directly involved into cutting the upper summit, but there will be a continuous degradation of the upper part as well. No, due to, yes, the rain wash and presence of glaciers or exogenous forces, snowfall, weathering, mass wasting, everything. Landslides will be more vulnerable in that area. So landslide will be there, rock slide, soil creep and all. So that depends upon the steepness of the slope. But that area will definitely be made more vulnerable. That's why the conical shape or the higher peaks are very conical in nature on the top, because they are relatively untouched by the weathering and erosional forces.
But there is a decrease.
There will always be a decrease in height over the period of time. Now, critical analysis. Here we'll talk about that both of them. Comparative analysis, both we'll talk about. Critically analyze, Davis, only Davis talk about. Penck may be mentioned, right? So when we talk about the both, so both of them, cyclic evolution he talks about, which has been severely criticized by various other geographers. J.T. Hack is the top name in that. Most prominent among these was names are Shorley and J.T. Hack. Shorley and Hack. Hack presented dynamic equilibrium theory in 1960s. This was the period when the study of geomorphology was experiencing a paradigm shift from denudation chronology to landscape evolution. Based on detailed quantitative investigation from investigation of form and process relationship on a relatively smaller scale. This was the period of quantitative revolution, 1960s. So they started using quantitative techniques, mathematical tools to explain that. Hack presented an explanation of the landscape evolution and suggested that these can be explained by the existing processes operating today. He further opined that landscape evolution can be treated as an open system, unlike the closed system suggested by Davis and Pink. The landscape adjusts its form to maintain a steady state of equilibrium in relation to the controlling factors. And are non-evolutionary in nature. For example, in an area with rocks arranged in horizontal layers, the harder rocks will form steeper and narrow valleys, and once the upper part is removed, the exposed softer rocks will be transformed into broader and wider valleys. Again, after the layer is removed and harder strata is exposed, the valley will be deeper and narrower. example, the layer with sandstone, clay, sandstone. A homogeneous area may develop similar landscape if the controlling factor which was rock earlier in our example are changed to climate, vegetation, volume of water, etc. Similarly, several factors may work in tandem to the landscape of an area. This theory is basically dynamic equilibrium theory presented by Hack. You don't need to use it in toto, right? So what this theory अगर separate आ जाता है तो इसको हम बात कर लेंगे. If the theory is independently asked, then you can talk about it. Otherwise, while criticizing the Davis and Penck, you just need to mention that cyclic evolution of landform has been challenged by various geographers. For example, Hack has suggested dynamic equilibrium theory of open system. What he suggests that there is no need to go into the past to understand the present landform, whereas the present or existing operating system may itself be more than sufficient for the evolution of landform. Right. That way, he suggests that any landform which are operating today may not necessarily have been operating in the past, defying the theory of uniformitarianism. However, this has also been criticized very severely and have not got much greater acceptability. But when we take into account the Davis and Penck, the cyclic evolution, first thing is that the period required, that is common to both. The period required for any cycle to complete cannot remain standstill or free from factors changing the nature of erosion. Both have assumed that the period of erosion will be free from crustal deformation, which can at best be appreciated for simplification rather than practical reality. Presence of a featureless plane can be only imaginary in the present landscape. However, there are features present in the shield areas which suggests after the bottom is exposed as featureless plane. Both have ignored the multiplicity of processes which may be required for the featureless plane if at all it happens. To be formed. Then climate geography, crustal geography, you can talk here. The cyclic evolution may be accelerated or decelerated by humans has been completely ignored. Besides the biological factor, the other biotic communities are also ignored.
This is all said by
No, this is all said by us. Hayek has only suggested that first part, that cyclic evolution may not be the norm, right? That may be the open system should be treated as a means to understand and study the landscape evolution in any area. rejuvenated landform are more a norm than monocyclic concept suggested by these two, which are commonly found in the older areas. For example, polycyclic landforms. The best example is Hundru Falls in Chotanagpur Plateau. Chotanagpur Plateau. No, this was polycyclic landform. Like the presence of multi-cycle, evidence of multi-cycle present in the same area. Maybe because of upliftment, maybe because of static changes. That is rejuvenation. Whatever factors we have discussed about rejuvenation, that is more commonly found in any area which is expected to be a featureless plain. Like present day, there is no example, no evidence of any featureless plain. So had this been a concept of monocycle, that's one cycle which starts from the uplifted area and then gets completed till the bottom of featureless plain, is not there. Even in the graded stream there is a slope, there is no featureless. The oldest part on the surface of the earth, or at least one of the oldest part on the surface of the earth, is the Peninsular Plateau. Even in the Peninsular Plateau there are areas like Chotanagpur Plateau, Bastar Plateau, Karnataka Plateau, which are oldest part on the surface of the earth. Even they don't have evidence of featureless plain, despite the fact that they were not originated the way we can expect origination of the tectonic landforms in the present day. That means the height of those older areas which are produced because of volcanic eruptions must not be as high as the mountains of Himalayas, right? Because volcanic eruption may not create that huge, great height and massive mass landforms, right? So initially they must have been having relatively smaller height. Even if we go for the short period and sudden phenomena of Davis, even that area which is expected to be very much in close conformity with the statement of Davis regarding the upliftment has not achieved the featureless peneplain as suggested by Davis. In that area, the best example is like Chotanagpur Plateau, Canadian Shield, the Siberian Shield part. These are the areas of the world, Chinese Plateau of the older origin. None of them show or reflects a feature of the true features of a featureless plain or peneplain or end drop of Penck. Right? The Chotanagpur, the presence of waterfall is a characteristic of youthful characters. River, and Chotanagpur is a very old area, that is what we call shields, and in that older area the presence of waterfall indicates the fact that there has been rejuvenation in this area. The presence of nick points in several rivers of the Peninsular Plateau, that can be cited as an example.